The reason I love DC is all of the weird characters with very specific powers. Often those powers are both silly and badass, and none are more silly and more badass than Metamorpho, the Element Man. One of my absolute all-time favorite DC characters. It's definitely exciting to see him now more frequently in animation, comics, and now live-action film, finally. But who is Metamorpho? What are his powers, and why do I love him so much? I don't really have a good answer for the last one, but as for the other questions, let's dive in. I'm Dan Upton, and this is the Doomcast. Alright, first off, do me a favor, hit subscribe and the bell. I make about one of these videos a week. They are all great, so please don't miss even one. I only talk about stuff that I love. I don't talk about stuff that I hate. With the new Superman Legacy movie giving us a first glimpse of Metamorpho and a new series coming out from Ewing and Steve Lieber from DC Comics, Metamorpho is having kind of a year. It's only like 7 days old, but it's still a year. Metamorpho, the alter ego of Rex Mason, was created by writer Bob Haney and Ramona Fradon for Brave and the Bold number 57. Ramona Fradon was already a staple of Aquaman and other DC books and felt that the character needed to look strange because his power didn't lend itself to a cape or a mask, as was the style at the time. He did not have an onion on his belt. But instead she used 4 different colors and textures to represent the different elements of the character within his body. George Cashton had conceived of a character made up of all of the different elements of a human body that was able to create different compounds based on those molecules, and gave the idea to former Doom Patrol writer Bob Haney, who fleshed it out and created the character with Ramona, who designed his look. Rex Mason was an adventurer who was under contract with Stag Industries and its CEO Simon Stagg. Stagg had tasked Rex and Jabba, an unthawed Neanderthal caveman who had not yet passed the bar, that Stagg had revived and hired as his personal bodyguard, presumably on an H-1B visa. Clearly, Stagg hires the very best people. Rex had obtained the Orb of Ra from within a pyramid when Jabba stole it from him. The orb had been fashioned from a meteorite, which bathed Rex's body in a transformative radiation and light that made him one of the Metamorphae. Rex is now a being that was entirely invulnerable, but now inhuman and unable to even die, but capable of transforming himself into any compound comprised of the molecules contained within his human body. When he returned transformed, he felt horrible and dejected for looking so inhuman and disgusting, but was still loved by his employer's daughter, Sapphire Stagg. So much so that Simon Stagg sought a way to kill Mason, even as he occasionally worked for him. This was a pretty standard employer-employee relationship in the 1960s. Multiple attempts were made by Rex Mason, Simon Stagg, and even the Justice League to return Rex to his original human state, but ultimately nothing worked, even though they came very close multiple times. He rejected an offer of work with the Justice League, but became a core member of Batman's Outsiders when they were formed. During his time with the Outsiders, Stagg discovered a way to kill Metamorpho that apparently involved the orb that actually created him, but the Outsiders also found that the same process could revive him from death. When he was revived, he was possessed by the orb's creator, Aktun, an ancient Egyptian, but was restored to his original self only to determine that this revival had permanently kept him in his Element Man state. He'd never be human again. Sapphire didn't care and ultimately married him. This was the first of multiple times that Metamorpho would be killed as a functionally immortal character by the Orb of Ra, only to be reconstituted, usually by the same means, back into his Element Man state. I think it's happened like 4 times if you count everything from pre-Crisis to New 52 continuity, and I'm not going to go into every single instance of this. In fact, I'm struggling to think of somebody who has died in comics quite as frequently as Metamorpho has. But it's always short-lived. It was usually Simon Stagg, Dr. Jace, regular Outsiders character, somebody like that. During the New 52, his origin was retconned into an intentionally manufactured superhero by Stagg Industries, who even created a fake villain for him in Bobby Fradon, a nod to his creator's name, a character named Dr. Dread. But after Doomsday Clock, his origin was restored to the original Element Girl, of course, is another of the Metamorphae. Introduced in Metamorpho number 10, she was Urania Blackwell, a CIA agent looking into the orb of Ra who underwent a similar transformation. While a few of her incarnations have forged her into a legitimately independent character, mostly she is very closely tied to Rex Mason, but not related or a romantic interest. Mason, like most of the Metamorphae's powers, are roughly the same. His skills as an adventurer, aviator, archaeologist, martial artist also definitely give him an edge. Of course, he was created in the 60s, so he can do all of that stuff. He's also able to shapeshift and stretch without any specified limit whatsoever, convert his body to any element not strictly limited to those within his body any longer. That was the original rule, now that's out the window. He can also create compounds which may be toxic or explosive or flammable. It isn't always a seemingly hard and fast rule that he has to convert it to something with the same amount of mass either. By refinement of any element, he might enhance a lot of his senses. So, for example, he could shift his eyes into elemental lenses that might give him night vision or telescopic vision or microscopic vision. His abilities are essentially that of Reed Richards and Ralph Dibny type of stretch character, but, very enhanced. He can also change his density and tangibility with a specific element that he chooses for any purpose. For example, if he wants to just hang out completely invisible and intangible, he could just be a cloud of oxygen, which he specifically did in the new run by Al Ewing. He's also entirely immortal and invulnerable. Obviously, he's been resurrected a bunch of different times. He was featured pretty heavily in Tom King's Danger Street, which was sufficiently weird, but mostly it was just his arm in diamond form, which got turned into a sword, and that was the state that he was in for the better part of that book. In Al Ewing and Steve Lieber's most recent foray into the Fab Freak, they moved the character to Jump City, the apparent new home of Stag Industries, and pitted Rex and Urania against a man named Mr. 3, the Three States Man, who can be either solid, liquid, or gas, who's an agent of Cyclops. Cyclops is an acronym. For what? I don't know yet. They haven't even mentioned it. But so far it's classic Metamorpho with weirdly stylized 60s dialogue, and I love the character, Al Ewing, and frequent Mark Russell collaborator Steve Lieber, so we'll see where this goes. But as a Fab Freak fan, I'm very excited to see him get a lot more love, and I can't wait for Superman. Thanks everybody for watching. This has been the Doomcast. We'll see you again next week. Peace.